there were lawsuits, there were battles. And over the last few months, we've actually seen that dynamic completely flip.
Great to have you here, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to understand, what was the catalyst for the conversation around AI and music?
So music is at the forefront of the creative fields that have been trying to grapple with what copyright is going to look like in the future, but also what the nature of human expression is going to be when we can just kind of make up human expression with a couple of prompts into an AI service.
So is this like people copywriting other people's music, taking it?
We're not quite reaching the level, I think, where people are copywriting other people's music, but if you're ripping off someone's copyright, it's just like the Napster era. When it comes down to, remember all the lawsuits with like Metallica and I think Dr. Dre, like suing these companies because, their copyrights were being violated. And for a long time, for the first 3 odd years of generative AI being in the public conversation, the music industry was against it. There were lawsuits, there were battles. And over the last few months, we've actually seen that dynamic completely flip, where you're actually seeing settlements between major labels and groups of independent labels and some of these AI services.
Okay, I want to come to that, but I want to make sure, I bet you've heard this, and I bet you our viewers have too. Take a listen.
Okay.
Now that might sound like Drake, but it's not. It's an AI-generated song using his voice that popped out in 2023. Drake's label got the song pulled down. Like, that sounds legit.
It sounds very legit, unfortunately. And that does sound like the Metro Boomin tagline, even. Like, it seems like it could have been real, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. That's how good they can get. Musicians are also being impacted by AI and music, published under their profile, under their names. What Canadian artists have felt that?
In terms of the sort of fake names, you're often seeing that happen with independent artists who might not have like labels sort of scanning streaming services to look out for fraud. I spoke with a gentleman named Ian James based out of Nova Scotia who found out he was releasing an album at one point about a year ago that he wasn't actually releasing, and then found out that this was sort of AI. He believed it was AI generated, and it certainly sounded like slop when I listened to some of the music that he had pulled down from streaming services. This is something that is becoming increasingly common even outside of AI, is people trying to just drift off of the sort of reputations of other existing musicians.
So first copyright, then people's names, and now there's a new problem around fake artists. Help me understand that.
Yeah, midway through last year, we had this band, using air quotes, scare quotes. I'm going to use that a lot, I think, when we're talking about AI, called the Velvet Sundown. And over the course of, they just sort of started surging on Spotify. And then over the course of a few months, people realized, oh, this is actually appears to be an entirely AI-generated artist. Even like if you take one look at their sort of press photos, it's very clearly got this sort of hazy look. Everything's a little bit too perfect, reminiscent of the 1970s, which they're trying to achieve in their sound, but it's fake.
But you have to look, Josh.
I know you have to
look.
look.
You have to actually look and ask other people. You wouldn't just know.
It's my job to look, but the average person is just like, oh, cool, interesting music. And that's where it kind of comes down to, what is music? And is music a product that is being sold to you, or is music human expression and the evolution of that expression that moves the culture?
Speaking of that expression, you and I can make AI-generated songs.
Yeah,
there's apps out there.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
It's some of these apps, particularly let's use Suno as an example, which signed a licensing agreement in the last few months with Warner. You can just type in a prompt. I've tried this myself when I was working on a story about this a little while ago, and I typed in a prompt about, what if Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song about eating 100,000 pies? Obviously not what Gordon Lightfoot would traditionally be writing songs about, and he hasn't put out music lately. He's passed on.
Yes.
And it generated in this kind of eerie folk song about, it was deadly serious, but the chorus was about just eating pies until you threw up, because it doesn't actually process what the reality of what a song might sound like. It just responds to the prompts.
If you and I are on those apps, I mean, how quick can we put something together? Like how fast can something be made?
If you put in a prompt, you can just wait just a few minutes in some cases, and then you've got this whole song. You're building a whole world that a human being would normally take days, if not months, to make, and it does it in a matter of minutes.
In a few minutes.
It's wild. It's completely replacing the thought process that goes into these works of human expression.
We were talking about the use of AI music and now how the industry has kind of changed its tune. Help me understand that. Like, where was the industry before and like, where is it now?
So the industry responded the way that most creative industries did at the beginning, was with lawsuits. There was a great deal of fear about the copyrighted material upon which whole industries are made just being sort of used and sort of thrown aside to create this AI music, which a lot of people call slop. And it took a long time for settlements to start happening. Over the past few months, we've seen a great deal of those.
But they've changed their tune.
Yes, they have.
And now they're going the other way saying, oh, we want to collaborate with AI companies.
Yeah, and I think part of that is sort of due to the mindset of what we sometimes call technological inevitabilism, which is the technology's here, we got to work with it. So let's license these catalogs to these AI services, and then that way we can at least get some kind of monetization going if people are just going to be generating songs anyway.
Some artists are fighting back
Yeah.
against the use of AI music overall. You know, how have the labels reacted to that?
So because the labels are finding ways now to legally license their catalogs to these AI services, we're finding that the labels are playing ball. You are seeing a lot of musicians themselves fighting back. And there's this chasm that is widening. That chasm between music and the music industry has always been there because it is another version of that battle of, is this a product or is this expression?
Sure.
But what you're seeing is this widening chasm. But the labels are saying, this is going to happen. People are going to use these services. And so if they're going to use these services, we want to use our bargaining power with these massive catalogs of music. And we want to get paid for that so we can pay that through to musicians. Although it's not really clear how much musicians will be paid.
We don't know that yet.
We don't know those terms yet.
We reached out to Music Canada, which represents Canada's 3 major record labels. Patrick Rogers, the association's CEO, writes, "The goal of licensing AI services is for our industry to go from the Napster era, where everything is scraped, stolen, and no one is paid, to the iTunes era, where the use of music by these models is licensed, legal, and where artists can participate." He added that different licenses announced at the end of 2025 will be important for creators and users alike, and stressed that the decision centers on enforcing artist copyright in both creation of AI models and their corresponding compensation. Big If True also reached out to each record label individually, but has not heard back. Full disclosure, Patrick Rogers, with Music Canada, is also a member of TVO's board of directors. The board has no editorial involvement in Big If True's production.
A recent survey showed that 97% of people can't tell whether something is AI generated or not when it comes to music. Can you tell?
I can kind of tell, but like I think it's getting more and more difficult. The software is getting just more and more mature. It's getting more refined, and it can mimic the sound of an acoustic guitar in various different rooms, which means that over time you are going to have people's voices being mimicked, not just instruments, and it's going to become this sort of, the uncanny valley may disappear. You might be fooled no matter how much you're trying to look at it.